Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and this is the Shanling ME700 Lite. Now, you might better know Shanling for their digital audio players. They make some pretty well-regarded DAPs, but this is obviously an IEM. And I was maybe not too surprised, but I was a little surprised to see that they do make a handful of different IEMs, including this, the ME700 Lite, which comes in at around 500 bucks, and for 500 bucks you get a 5-driver hybrid. You get 4 balanced armatures for mid-range and treble. You get 1 dynamic driver. I believe they describe it as a titanium dynamic driver for the bass. And how does it all turn out? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. So for 500 bucks, obviously not the most expensive IEM out there, but definitely not cheap. And so this thing's up against some pretty stiff competition, and I was curious to see how it stacked up. So for the past couple of weeks, I've been listening to this and listening to it versus some other stuff. Yeah, this is like all my other reviews though. It's going to be a live review, and if you're watching now live, you're in the live chat, you have any questions about the Shanling or anything else that's been going on lately, drop them in the live chat, and at the end of the review, getting a little ahead of myself, at the end of the review, we'll have a little back and forth conversation. But for now, let's just start with the Shanling. Start by talking about the build and what comes inside the box, and that's what I've got laid out here for you. If you saw my unboxing video, which I did a couple of weeks ago, you'll notice, you might have remembered that the box, the unpackaging process was kind of nice. It's got drawers, which is fancy, but what really matters is what's inside them drawers. That's, well, don't take that out of context, or you can. But anyways, what we get inside the box, let's take a look first at this, I don't know, pretty handsome little carry case. I didn't actually use this, like I don't usually use a lot of the carry cases that come with IEMs, but this one's pretty nicely made. It's got sort of this faux leather on the outside that looks pretty handsome. It's got a magnetic clasp. The compartment inside is a little bit recessed, which I do find that, sometimes this will make a little bit difficult to insert the egress and ingress of an IEM. But for the most part, I don't know, I think it's pretty good, pretty well done. They also include a cleaning brush, which try not to think about that too much. And then they also include a pretty wide selection of tips, which I'll punch in on real quickly. They give you a set of vocal ear tips, soundstage ear tips, as well as balanced ear tips. And for my listening, I did it all with the balanced ear tips, which are kind of interesting for a couple of reasons. One, they're actually pretty nice ear tips. Like the quality of the silicone is actually pretty solid. And the other thing that's worth calling out is that, and it's surprisingly only on the balanced tips, but they've actually got kind of like a spin fit design where you can see this little notch here in the nozzle. That basically allows the tip to kind of rotate inside your ear canal ostensibly. Yeah, basically just fits a lot like a spin fit, which I think was kind of neat. So yeah, pretty nice set of tips, honestly. But again, I only really use the stock balanced tips. Now we get to the build quality here, and we'll start with talking about this cable, which honestly I'm not too big a fan of. It's a little bit on the thin and wiry side, you might be saying. It's a little bit memory prone. You can see it's kind of like trying to put itself back into whatever shape it was in. Not a big fan of the cable, if I'm honest. Like, it looks pretty nice, frankly, even though it is a little bit on the thin side. I don't mind that too much, but it's just kind of kinky and nasty looking. A little bit on the ratty side. The Y-split's pretty nice and small. The chin cinch is, I don't know, somewhat useful, but mostly it just kind of slides around. But you can see that at least roadie wrapping, well, I guess the roadie wrap is almost undefeated, so maybe it shouldn't be a surprise that the roadie wrap does put these things together quite nicely, and they'll sit still. That actually looks pretty handsome. That was one of the best roadie wraps I've done in a while. But anyway, that will bring us now finally to the earpieces themselves. And I guess worth calling out, these are MMCX connectors, so you could ostensibly swap that out with a different cable. But the earpieces, I think, are actually really, really handsome. I think this is one of the more handsome IEMs I've seen. And it's simple, right? It's just white, kind of like this milky white, almost looks like a ceramic. It's still, it's a lightweight plastic. It doesn't, I don't know, it's got a decent amount of weight to it, I guess. It's not the lightest IEM for sure, but it doesn't feel like a ceramic. That would make it just like mucho premium, but honestly, I think the way that it looks right now, I'm pretty into. However, when it comes to the fit, well, I'll just say that the fit is pretty aggressive. And part of it comes down to, I think, fairly large earpieces as well as a relatively long nozzle. So I'll show you how it looks inside my ear as I squeeze it in there, and it fits quite comfortably, quite snugly. But again, it is pretty aggressive in that fit. So and a lot of that comes down to just a relatively large, let's see if I can get that on camera. There you go. Kind of front to back is a little bit on the large side. And then again, the nozzle length is a little bit on the long side. Maybe we can zoom in on that so you can take a look. I guess it doesn't actually necessarily look that long here. But I think because it's got this bit right here jutting out, and maybe it just snugs into my ear so well that it ends up fitting a little bit on the deep side. The other thing worth calling out with the fit is that I do get, unfortunately, a little bit of driver flex on the left side. I don't get it on the right side. And that, if you're not familiar with what driver flex is, that's just the effect of when you put an IEM in your ear and the compression of air kind of results in crinkling of the dynamic driver inside of the earpiece. It's not necessarily a negative or like a longevity or a durability concern or anything like that. It's just kind of unpleasant and it sounds a little cheap, and frankly I think in a $500 IEM I like to see better. That said, I've heard much more expensive IEMs that also have driver flex, like some Empire Ears stuff, so not unheard of, but there you go. But I think that is going to lead us into talking about the sound here on the Shanling ME700 Lite. And the general tune, the general tonality, I would describe as kind of a very forward, bright neutral. It's got, the vocal range, the upper mid range is definitely very, very forward on this IEM. The treble is also a little bit forward, but not overly so. I wouldn't say that the treble is necessarily very aggressive. And then in the bass region, it's maybe slightly north of neutral in the bass, but mostly in line with my neutral target, which I think is a pretty good amount of bass. But if you're looking for like a bass heads IEM, the Shanling is definitely not going to be that. So that's kind of the general tune of this IEM. What are the things I like about it? So I would say that generally I think resolution and detail and stuff on this is actually pretty solid. Maybe not top of the class here at around $500, but I think it's pretty competitive, honestly. I think the BAs in there generally doing a pretty good job. And maybe some of that sense of detail is coming through a little bit extra because of how forward this tune is. Again, kind of like a more warmer, laid back tune might have a difficult time giving you a sense of detail unless it's really, really well executed. And I think having a forward bright tune here gives a bit of an advantage to the Shanling. And then I think also, along those same lines, I think imaging on here is actually pretty decent. Not, again, necessarily standout, but it's pretty solid, pretty well done. And I think that the dynamic driver bass in here is honestly pretty nice. Like, again, it's not a bassy set by any means. But I don't think it's, I don't think it's skimpy on the mid bass. I think that the bass presentation is just really solid. It's not completely sub bass focus. It's a bit of kind of like a Blessing 2 style where it's got that mid bassy extending into the sub bass, but it's not like a lot of mid bass, obviously. So I find that tuning tends to be just about my favorite in terms of bass responses, and I think it's actually pretty well done here. I think the bass honestly is probably the best executed aspect here on the Shanling ME700, but again, don't get it twisted, this is not a bass head set, so it's just well done bass for a neutral IEM. Now, what I don't necessarily love about the Shanling, if the bass is sort of the best part, I would say, unfortunately, I think the treble is probably the worst part here on the Shanling. And again, it is a forward treble, a little bit on the bright side, but not overly aggressively so. So, the treble tuning, I do think if you look at it on a frequency response graph, it's going to show quite a bit of like 8K region, which you could associate with sibilance and harshness. And I think there's, maybe some of that comes through here in the Shanling. It's not the smoothest through the mid-treble region, so it can give a little bit of sharpness to certain vocal characteristics. But honestly, I didn't find it to be nearly as bad as the graph looks. So it's not necessarily the tuning that is the issue that I have with the treble here. It's more about just like the BA character, the balanced armature character. So if I'm describing kind of balanced armature treble character in general, is it can be a little bit on the digital side, a little bit plasticky, and a little bit like, when it's not that well done, it can almost sound kind of like sticks kind of clacking against each other. And honestly, that's kind of how I feel about the treble here in the Shanling, is it just feels a little plasticky, a little clacky. And just generally, I think the treble is not that well done here. I do think also that BA character kind of continues through to the mid-range. I think the mid-range tuning on this is, well, we'll get into that in a little bit, but the BA character specifically, I don't know, I think it just kind of impacts the overall sense of timbre. This is just kind of a stand-in word for things that I don't know how to describe any better, but I think the mid-range timbre on here just comes across a little bit on the plasticky and artificial side. But also, you know, I think that the tuning probably also has a bit to do with that as well, because the mid-range tuning on this, I mentioned it's got quite a bit of forwardness in that vocal region, and to my ear, I think it's got maybe too much, but maybe it's like, it's starting too early. I would describe that, I think the sound here has almost got kind of a bit of the way I described it is a bit of an AM radio vibe. It's a little bit honky sounding, which just means that there's, you know, a lot of forwardness. And a lot of that forwardness can kind of carry through to sort of like throat noises, which doesn't sound that appealing or anything like that. But yeah, just generally, I found that because of sort of that tuning character and then the balance armatures, that the mid-range just generally was not the greatest. And then just overall, you know, I think that it's not a bad sound, if I'm honest. You know, I just complained quite a bit about the treble and the mid-range, but the bass honestly is pretty solid on this. And again, the imaging and separation and detail is decently well done here. But frankly, for $500, I don't know that it's that standout. So out of 5 stars, I'm going to go ahead and give the Shanling ME700, I think 3 stars. Again, not a bad set, but at $500, there's some pretty stiff competition, and I didn't bother doing sort of a ranking comparison with this because the stuff that I've got, let's see, like at $500, I just reviewed the Moondrop Variations. I've got the Duno EST112, the Final Audio B3. I think all of those are quite a bit ahead of this in most ways, especially the Variations and the Duno. There's not much that these things have to beat them on, so it wouldn't have been that nice of a comparison. But anyway, if you're interested in checking out the Shanling ME700 Lite, of course I got a link in the description down below, and shout out to Shanling for sending this in for review. While you're down there, if you found this video helpful, you liked it, please hit the like button. It really does help me out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Ding that YouTube bell, and then I'll catch you in the next super review. And if you're here now live, hang out and let's have a little chat. All right, let me put this thing away and catch up with live chat as best as possible. How's it going? Good afternoon, good evening. So I guess it's 5 o'clock here in California. I can count that as an evening. I should go for a walk. Yeah, let me catch up with chat. Big Boss, y'alls, what's up? How you doing? Ahmed Ali, hi brother. How you doing, man? Nice to see you in there, Joshi. This is not a live stream, is it? It is a live stream. Surprise. Chick Tomas, how you doing? Nice to see you again as well. J-Cap saying, I'm guessing the iBasso turned out too messed up to review, and that's kind of true. I had an issue with my iBasso ITL1X that I actually unboxed at the same time that I unboxed the Shanling. That said, iBasso did actually send out a new unit that I've got. I got it maybe late last week, and so I have been spending some time listening to that, and that review will probably be next. Maybe as soon as tomorrow. The new unit does not have any problems. Kiseki Hikari, sup, how you doing? Nice to see you there. Snaz McBerry saying, at some point, I'd really like to see your setup for controlling the cameras for the live stream. It's so smooth. Looks like it was pre-recorded. Okay, it's not that complicated. I think a lot of people that do streaming on Twitch and stuff are probably using a similar setup, but I use the Stream Deck, and I've got a camera here, I've got a camera there, I've got my microphone mounted here now, which is nice. I used to use the lavalier microphone. I like this better. And then now I've also got an iPad mounted directly below my camera, so I can see the chat here, which is a little bit less breaking eye contact, but I still get it's still breaking eye contact. But yeah, maybe, I don't know, if you want to join the Discord server, I'd be happy to post a picture, maybe like a behind the scenes video or something like that. Yeah. Maybe a YouTube short if I can figure out how to post a YouTube short. Ishan, how's it going? Nice to see you again. And Snaz McBarry, I think, responding to the talk about the driver flex, saying, oof, no pressure venting. Driver flexing means static pressure, and static pressure is an instant nope, having experienced headphones with venting like Moondrop Blessing 2. So I will say that there is a vent on the back of this unit. And so, you know, I'm not 100% sure what are the conditions that lead to driver flex, because, you know, I've definitely tried some IEMs that have zero venting, and pretty much anything with the dynamic driver. I don't know if I've heard any dynamic drivers with zero venting. I think that's probably a safety hazard. So, you know, these things have some venting, obviously, but it's still resulting in driver flex, unfortunately. Big Boss calling the 3 stars early. Man, very impressive. Paul saying good evening. Good evening. Nice to see you there. And Tyson Engel saying, man, that's a fresh looking IEM. I agree. Let's just go back to this thing. And, you know, maybe I don't love listening to this thing, but honestly, just looking at it, I think that is a pretty handsome IEM. Just nice and simple. I even like the yellow cable on this white earpiece with these ear tips with the light blue. Like, it's just, I think fresh is actually a good word. Tyson, good choice of words there. Chen Quan Jin with this super chat. Appreciate it. Love my review. Hey, I love you hanging around and chatting. Paul saying AM radio vibe, ouch. And yeah, that might be a little bit extreme, but that's kind of the effect. I think that it's like an overemphasis in kind of the mid-range, which is like a little bit before the upper mid-range, where you tend to find, and maybe part of this is like, I've seen the frequency response graph and that's influencing my interpretation. So I'm going to use the frequency graph to describe my interpretation. But basically, most frequency response graphs, or I think the best ones, they'll be relatively flat in the mid-range, and then they'll start to rise for the upper mid-range around 1000 hertz. Here on the Shanling, it's a bit earlier than that, and I tend to associate that with, and this is not a me thing, this is a pretty common terminology, that tends to be associated with a sense of honkiness, which kind of sounds like there's like this overemphasis in like the lower tones of the voice, kind of leading into the upper tones of the voice. And it gives it kind of a flat sound, and that's why I use the description of AM radio. It's not so much necessarily a matter of resolution, which is definitely a thing that AM radio will take out. You know, I think the resolution here in the Shanling is pretty decent. It's just more, it's much more so the tonal aspect of it, and it's just like a lack of contrast that sounds pretty weird. Not pretty weird, it just sounds a little off. Cheeb's asking SSR techs versus this. I would definitely much rather listen to the SSR personally, but I also didn't do direct comparison. I think, oh, that's tough. Yeah, I don't know. I think SSR is better in a lot of ways. Rob Hawk asking, would I pick the less expensive Tantrum Hana or Oxygen over the Shanling? And the answer is yes. I would pick both of those over this. In fact, I've been listening to the Oxygen. In fact, I've actually got it sitting right here because I've been listening to it. Because, heads up, there is a new Tantrum Hana. Sorry, I said Oxygen. This is the Hana. There is a new Tantrum Hana coming out very, very soon. In fact, it might actually already be available now on Shenzhen Audio, and I believe I'm getting one for review. So look out for that soon, but I have been listening to that recently, and yes, I would pick that over the Shanling. Although, I guess worth zooming in on this. Look, they both have that handsome, fresh white look. Although I gotta say, this is a little bit fresher. Poop here saying hello, Mr. Review. Hello, Mr. Poop. Nice to see you there. Big Boss, I see, also appreciating Mr. Poop. Jeremy Kiros, how you doing? Nice to see you again. Per Nicolaisen, hello from Greenland. Nice to see you. Wow, I don't think I've talked to anybody in Greenland before. This would be a first. That's cool. What time is it in Greenland right now? I guess it's pretty late. Oh, Big Boss, you're saying that you use an iPad setup for Zoom calls. That's actually for screen share specifically. I actually did that not too long, I think maybe 2 weeks ago. I was giving a presentation and I had my laptop set up underneath my iPad and I was able to screencast or basically use my iPad as an external display. Thanks macOS Big Sur or whatever. That actually worked out really, really well, especially on a laptop, because you don't have a ton of screen real estate and you want to have, you know, notes or whatever up. Being able to dedicate an iPad to displaying the presentation was actually pretty useful. Big Boss saying maybe I should get the Hanas for the fresh look. I mean, look at that. That is pretty fresh, especially once you put on a Moondrop SSR cable. And then I've also got on SpinFit tips because these seem to make them a little bit more secure in my ears, but they complete the fresh look. It's all about that freshness. Jeremy asking, in my opinion, what are the freshest IEMs I've ever tried? Interesting. I have not thought about freshness as a ranking thing. How do we even define freshness? When I think of something being described as fresh, I really do think back to like sneakers. I don't know, maybe is that a common term that sneakerheads use for describing their sneakers? But fresh to me sounds like you're describing sneakers, and it's like a clean look, maybe low contrast, but clean. And that's where I feel like kind of both of these IEMs do complete that. If this had an all white cable and maybe not like a glossy cable, but kind of like a matte look cable, this would look pretty clean and fresh. I mean, it looks pretty fresh as is, but yeah, now that I'm thinking right now, I can't think of anything else that I would describe as fresh, but maybe I'll spend some time noodling on that one. Precog, nice to see you there. ACD Burn 2000 saying, I have found I enjoy some balanced armatures mid-range into upper mid-range. I do want to try some of the EST trebles. Yeah, I think having now heard a fair number of EST driver earphones, I'm starting to get a pretty good sense of what EST treble is. And honestly, I think I like it. I know the EST treble is kind of got, it's got mixed reception in the reviewer circles, which is fine. And I think there's a lot of interest in like the audio, like the consumer market. Like I think people are interested in a new technology and they want to try it out. And I would be perfectly honest with you, like that might be part of what it appeals to me about it, is just that it's different. But it does have a character to it that I quite like. I think the EST treble, in my experience so far, tends to give me that same sort of speed and that same sort of fastness that I really like in balanced armature treble. But balanced armature treble, I find, can tend to have a bit of a plasticky digitalness to it. And it kind of comes in various different forms. I think the Shanling is a really strong example of that strong digital like clackiness. They don't all necessarily sound like that, but that was the effect here. I think there is also maybe like a bit of a harshness to the initial attack on some balanced armatures, which, you know, again, most of the times I've been pretty okay to accept that because I like the speed and I like the control and the tonality that IEM manufacturers can get out of balanced armatures. But I feel like the ESTs kind of give them that same flexibility and that same speed, but giving it a more rounded character to the initial attack that maybe comes at slight expense of a sense of detail. but to me, it sounds more organic, and it sounds a little bit easier to listen to. Michael Hall asking, how many IEMs do I have? In my cabinet over here, I've got over 110 sets. And then so I'm probably pretty close to 120 sets at this point. I need to get some more boxes for them because I'm running out of boxes. Yeah. Too many, maybe, is another way to answer that question. Victor P saying, I've recently tried some EST treble hybrids, and I have to agree with Kryn that most of them do sound a bit wispy. The only one that did not give me that impression was the MEST. Interesting. I haven't heard the MEST. And I think I can relate to what you're talking about. There are some other IEMs that I would describe as having kind of a wispy sounding treble that aren't necessarily ESTs. But the maybe the variations that I reviewed just recently kind of had a hint of that. To me, that didn't seem nearly as dominant as, I guess, the trade-off or the other character that I described about balanced armatures. But again, maybe I just haven't listened to enough of them. Orange Moon 316 saying, innovation, freshness. I'm not sure what that means, but maybe I should add freshness to the review scale. So we'll have how many stars out of 5 stars, and then fresh or not. Probably not going to do that, though. Chen Quan Jin, you're saying the DD Hi-Fi Janus is pretty fresh. Okay, I'll take a look at that one after. And Jeremy Kiros, you're backing him up, saying the Janus does look pretty fresh. Cool, I'll have to take a look at that. But yeah, folks, I think I'm going to keep this one short. I'm going to go for a walk, and yeah, that's going to be the end of the stream. But really, thanks for tuning in, hanging out, having a chat. If you like this video, please do hit the like button down below. I'm sure you're subscribed to the channel. I'm sure you've dung the bell. If you haven't already, though, check out the link in the description down below to my Discord server, where I spend way too much time. But if you want to ask me questions, want to ask me to measure something maybe in a different way that I haven't measured it already, it's usually a good place to get in touch with those sorts of requests. But otherwise, I will catch you on the next super review, and have a good week. Cheers.